Good morning. Today we're going to cover note-taking strategies. So let me go ahead and share the screen here. Coming on through and share. And we should have, all right, note-taking strategies. Get rid of you and put you here. Anytime. All right. Note-taking strategies are essential for being successful at the college or university level. And here are some tips for that. In high school, your class notes were probably given to you by the instructor. Although this is very convenient, it does not build good note-taking skills. In college, by contrast, college instructors and professors rarely, if ever, give you their notes. It is understood that you will take accurate notes in class and use these notes as part of an overall strategy to pass the course. A simple mnemonic device will help you to take accurate notes in class. It's called SOARS, and it stands for singled out, on the board, asked, repeated, or stressed. Singled out. Your instructor will give you clues as to what is important. Look for 1, time spent addressing a specific term. 2, time spent addressing a specific process. 3, time spent addressing a specific date, event, or example. You're probably detecting a theme here. When an instructor spends time on one of the above, it signifies that this is important information and you should write it down. If an instructor mentions a word, date, or name in passing, it is not core content and probably need not be written down. The key here is time. The overriding quality or criteria about what you should write down in a class is always how much time the instructor spends on that piece of information. So singled out. On the board, this category includes not just chalk, white, or smartboard notes, but any information projected from a computer or overhead. Again, the key concept here is time. If an instructor spends time and energy presenting terms, diagrams, outlines, or other information on the board, you should write it down. Hint, anytime the instructor is writing, you should be writing. Always. Try to use the same formatting as the instructor because it may form a visual aid to help understand the relationship between the concepts. The next part of SOARS is asked. Write down any questions asked by either the instructor, your classmates, or any that pop into your head while listening. 2, be sure to write down any answers as well. 3, follow up with unanswered questions right after class. And 4, why? Because questions posed by the instructor often wind up on quizzes and exams. And sometimes good questions by other students or even by you might wind up on that exam as well. Repeated. If an instructor comes back to an idea, term, or explanation, anything really, this means he or she is spending valuable class time on it. Again, the key word here is time. This should signal the importance of the idea. Pay close attention to what the instructor says about it and write it down. Stressed. Instructors will stress information in various ways. They will give you verbal cues. Instructors very rarely say, "This is important," or "write this down." Instead, listen for things like pauses, or changes in a tone of voice, or a variation of the pacing of the words. When an instructor does this verbally, he or she is drawing attention to those ideas being discussed at that moment, and that is a verbal cue. Nonverbal cues you might look for are hand or arm gestures. Really important ideas are typically accompanied by some form of hand gesture, maybe a pointing, arms moving, big things like that. Look for body language. Often the instructor will change his or her body language or position to emphasize a point. Eye contact is very important. If the instructor is making eye contact with you or another student in the class, pay attention. And of course, writing on the board is a nonverbal cue. All these cues, as well as those unique to the instructor, will indicate what the instructor thinks is important, and you should write that down. Now, how should we take notes? Before class, 1. Separate your class notes. Use a different notebook for each class. It doesn't matter if you're using a 5-subject or 3-subject notebook. Inevitably, you will run out of space and start putting information in another section or another notebook, which means your notes will be separated, not combined. Inconvenient for studying and very easy to lose. Use one notebook per class. B. Review notes from the previous class before the lecture. Often, lectures flow into each other. There's a continuity in there. So reviewing what you read or reviewing what you learned in the first class leads into the next class coming up will make the information you're about to be exposed to easier to understand. C. Position yourself in the T section of the classroom. What we mean by that is very simple. The front row composes the top of the T, and the middle section composes the base. It forms a T shape. Studies indicate that students who place themselves in the T section of a classroom are often more successful than those who do not. D. Ensure, it's common sense really, ensure you've gone to the restroom or gotten a snack prior to class if necessary because you don't want to be distracted by your bladder or by your stomach while you're trying to take notes. E. Do not sit next to anyone who will distract you. You know who they are. Stay away from them. And F. Turn off your phone and put it away. In addition to being a distraction, very few things irritate an instructor more than looking out at the class and seeing people looking at their phones and not paying attention to what's going on during the lecture. 2. During class, take good notes. See the previous slides. B. Stay focused. Your mind may drift. We're human. This happens. So force it to come back to the lecture. Place a question mark in your notes where your mind started to drift so you can ask questions to fill that area in later. C. Do not cover the entire page with notes. Leave white space so you can make additions and annotations later and ensure the notes are easier to read. A common note-taking system that utilizes white space is the Cornell Note-taking system pictured to the right. The use of white space on the left allows you to write down questions or ideas about class notes, such as main ideas, people, vocabulary, etc. The bottom portion allows you to write a quick summary about the notes on the page. The summary, along with the cue section on the left, makes studying much easier and less complicated. Ideas pop out because you made them pop out. The center section, of course, is reserved for the actual class notes you take. If you set up your note paper in this fashion before you begin taking notes, it will make the study process and the note-taking process much more simplified and much more effective. How to take notes. During class, you might want to use abbreviations to speed up the note-taking process. Some of you probably already have abbreviations that you use, but to the right is a list of commonly used abbreviations in note-taking that can help you take more accurate notes faster. I suggest you become familiar with some of them and try to implement them in your note-taking. Outlines are important in taking notes. Oftentimes, instructors will deliver notes in an outline form. We may be operating off of an outline that we have. So you want to use an outline yourself if you can, because they will in fact create a visual aid to show how ideas are related. You may use an informal outline as pictured to the left, or a more formal outline as pictured to the right. In the more formal outline, you see how the interrelationship ideas pop out much more readily than the informal one. Both have their strengths and weaknesses. The informal is much easier to write down quickly rather than the formal, which sometimes takes a little bit more thought processing in order to create it. Perhaps maybe when you're revising your notes, you may switch from an informal to a formal outline. Whichever one you pick, just make sure you stick to it and use it in class. After class, it's important. Look over notes to see if you need to clarify anything or fill in any gaps. Look for those little question marks you might have put. 2, write down the point you understand the least and try to find clarification in your book or notes. 3, write a 1-minute summary of what the class was about. This very easily or very quickly makes you focus on what the main ideas were. What sticks the most is probably what the instructor was emphasizing the most. 4, review your notes within 24 hours while they are still fresh in your mind. That way, you'll notice if there's any incongruities, any gaps, any missing information that you need to fill in. And it also reinforces the information in your memory. 5, use highlighters to color code your notes. So for example, you may use yellow for definitions or blue for processes. So you know when you're looking at your notes, if I'm trying to find a definition, I just look for the yellow stuff and there it is. 6, try to come up with 2 to 3 points for questions or class discussions. Remember, you're trying to anticipate what questions might be asked on a test, and instructors really do like the idea that you went home, looked at your notes, and came back and asked for clarification and discussion on ideas that they covered in class. 7, follow up with instructor if necessary. If you can't find, say, like number 2, if you can't find a muddy point and fill it in for any books, talk to the instructor, and the instructor should be able to handle that for you. And finally, read your notes out loud, to yourself. This enacts auditory learning. You know, we're combination of learning styles: tactile, auditory, kinesthetic, visual. So when you're looking at the notes, that brings visual. When you read the notes to yourself, now you have auditory, and you also, believe it or not, have kinesthetic, because you're going through the process of actually saying something. So the more entry points information can get into your brain, whether it's kinesthetic, visual, auditory, etc., the more readily you'll be able to recall information. And these are the main ideas on note-taking that I have for you. I'm going to stop the screen share right here and come back to this point. So if you have any questions on note-taking, please feel free to contact me. I'll be happy to handle any questions. And this will conclude the recording. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording right where we're at right now. Goodbye and good day.